Cool. So, like Bryce said, my name is Brian Warehime. I'm currently a principal threat researcher at a company called JIRA. Today, my talk is called JIRA Diary. Today, I'm at my first APT. I didn't really find an APT, but this talk is more about the diary part. It's about a tool called threatnote.io, which is a notebook for cyber threat intelligence analysts to use to kind of store, document research, and get context for your intelligence processes. So quick agenda, we'll do a quick intro to threatnote.io, kind of what this presentation is all about. We'll go into some context about threat intel and why this is relevant to the threat intel space. Then the challenge that I was facing that kind of prompted me to build this tool. And then we'll do a live demo of threatnote.io so you can see what this is all about. And then lastly, some takeaways. So why did we sit through this presentation? So quick little blur about myself. Like I said, I'm principal threat researcher at JIRA. Prior to that, I got my start in the Air Force doing intelligence work for them. I went to the DoD for a little bit, and now I've been working in the commercial space for around 7 years now. I love building new tools, so anything really focusing traditionally on like open source intelligence, incident response, threat intel, but anything security related, I like working on. I do some Splunk stuff, cloud stuff, anything that can help contribute to the community. I like open sourcing my tools. And so once I get done with this one, this will be open source as well. So I just like giving back to the community any ways I can. So with that, threatnote.io, it's a tool for cyber threat intelligence teams, new and old, to kind of manage your CTI processes in a more formalized approach. A few things that we do is we track and manage your intelligence requirements. You can draft reports that link back to those requirements. And then we manage IOCs because no tip is complete without one. And then we can manage your consumers. So we're going to dig into each one of those real quick. The intelligence requirements part, that's the most crucial step in a threat intel team. That kind of sets your direction for what you want to collect, what you want to analyze, and what you want to produce. Without requirements, you're kind of just wandering around and doing whatever work, and it's not really tied to any customer, and it's not addressing any gaps that you face. So we want to make that kind of the forefront of the product and set the direction again for your analysis. Next, generating those reports. So when you have your requirements that kind of says like, hey, we need to do this work, you can do that, generate those reports that tie back to those requirements in the platform. The platform is pretty cool because it's a rich text editor, it's markdown, and we enrich any indicators in the platform with some third-party sources. Next, another big step in your intel process is staying on track with your stakeholders. So these are the people that consume the intelligence that you're producing. Knowing like kind of the status of these requirements, if they're due, if they're upcoming, who needs them, what format, that's really important, and we try to capture that in the platform as well. Lastly, there's plenty of tools to manage IOCs, and I don't want this one to be that's not the forefront of this tool. We do have some sort of IOC management, but again, that's not what this tool is built for. And we get these IOCs from your reports. We automatically extract them. Right now, we support a bunch: URLs, domains, emails, IPs, attack techniques, vulnerabilities, hashes, and more. So those are all, you don't have to worry about adding them or updating any kind of spreadsheet with them. They're automatically extracted from your documents that you report, that you write. And then we automatically enrich them too with a bunch of third-party sources. So Threat Intel 101. So why is this important? Why does this relate to ThreatNote? And how does this tie into like the Threat Intel lifecycle? So doing Threat Intel work, there's kind of a lifecycle that we all follow, all the teams follow. And I'll kind of go through that here so you can see how we relate to it. The first phase is the planning and direction phase. And so again, that's the creating the intelligence requirements, creating the collection requirements. So like sort of what data you need to satisfy these intelligence requests or requirements. This is also identifying the gaps. So the actual questions that you want answers to. It's identifying the outcomes from this intelligence work. And again, setting really the direction that you want your intel analysis team to be focusing on. Next is collection. So once you have your requirements, you need to actually collect that data to support it. So if your requirement is around phishing campaigns or seeing what sort of threat actors are targeting your organization with spoof domains or something like that, you want to be able to collect the data that supports those requirements. And that could be like who data, your email gateways, your firewalls, things like that. So that's the actual collection of the data that you want to satisfy your requirements. Next is the process and exploitation phase. So with that data, you want to turn that into kind of information. And so that's kind of like parsing it, it's sorting it, it's putting in a spreadsheet, making sure it's readable, getting a good format that you actually can do the analysis on. Then that moves on to the analysis and production phase. So with that information, you want to turn that into intelligence. So you have the data, it goes to information, then it becomes intelligence. That's when you're actually analyzing it, producing it into a meaningful format that you could then share with your stakeholders. Lastly, that dissemination phase, that's the sharing of whatever format they want it on. So it could be a report, it could be a CSV of indicators, it could be pushing indicators to like MISP or some other threat feed management tool. So how does ThreatNode tie into this? So with the planning direction phase, again, we manage those intelligence requirements, we manage the collection requirements, and we can identify the consumers. So again, the consumers are who's going to be accepting this information, this intelligence work. The collection phase, we can't really do much with because it's kind of dependent upon the intelligence requests themselves, and I can't build something that goes collects your data for you. Same with the process and exploitation phase, because again, that's kind of dependent upon the data that you collect. We can't really process it and enrich it or do anything with it there. So what we can do though is with the analysis and production phase, we can help you with the analysis because once you have your reports in there, like I said, we will automatically extract those indicators and do that third-party indicator enrichment through a bunch of different sources to give you some context to help your analysis. So if you have a domain in there, we'll automatically give you some domain information that you can use for your analysis. And then next is the intelligence reporting. So it's actually producing the reports that your consumers would want. That way you can just hand it off to them. In the dissemination phase, we have a few different ways right now. We support exporting the reports and indicators to MISP. We can export to a PDF. We have Slack webhooks, which really isn't dissemination, but it's another way to like say you're about to disseminate it. So anything that comes up from, if you create a new report or a new requirement, those can be sent to Slack automatically. And lastly, if you share or if you give access to your consumers, give access to ThreatNode to your consumers, you can share the reports right there in the platform with them. So next is about the challenge. So what prompted me to build ThreatNode? The challenge was that there's not really a lot of tools to manage these things, at least from my experience. I haven't looked at all the tips out there, but I think a lot of them focus more on the IOC phase of it and not really the requirements and reporting process. You can certainly manage a lot of these things with JIRA, Confluence, and Excel, but they're not purpose-built. They definitely get the job done. We use those too, so I think a lot of organizations rely on some sort of like Google Docs or Confluence thing, and they work, but again, they don't really kind of support anything else besides that, besides just writing them down. So with ThreatNode, we kind of combined a lot of different tools into one. You'll see we use like a lot of different enrichment sources, MISP, Gray Noise, RiskIQ, Shodan, and then again, we kind of combine Excel, JIRA, Confluence, Word, anything like that into a centralized platform. 1 second, please. So another challenge, there's not really a standard in our field for managing requirements and reports. And honestly, that's probably okay because all the teams have different needs, everybody's have different requirements, everybody's have a different format for how they report things. So it's totally fine if there's not a standard out there. But with ThreatNode, I try to give some sort of guidance to make it easier for new teams, especially to get started with threat intel. It also can work for mature teams if you want a new platform to kind of manage a lot of these processes for you and switch off Confluence and Excel and stuff like that. This certainly works for you, but I try to make it so I ask some of the questions that you should be asking yourselves when you're doing your requirements to kind of help you and give you like a head legs up right there. So again, I built this to give a single platform to manage most of your aspects of a threat intel program. It's built with simplicity and user experience in mind. So with the first ThreatNode I built, I built ThreatNode a few years ago for another purpose, and I'm rebuilding it now. But with the first one, it was sort of the same, and I made it so you didn't have to put in a lot of information to just get your job done. A lot of tips I saw, You had to put in like a lot of different very abstract and complex pieces in there, and it wasn't just like, give me a place to write down my thoughts. And that's what I wanted. I just want a place you can go in there and quickly just jot down your thoughts and disseminate that information. So I make it really on the focus. I make the focus being like writing those reports and getting that information out there without a lot of overhead. So with that, we're gonna talk about the platform itself and go to a quick demo too. So just to give you an idea of, again, what the tool does, we can generate intelligence requirements that drives our work that we're gonna be doing. Again, that's all the questions that we're gonna be trying to answer. With that, we can create the reports, which link back to those intelligence requirements, which hopefully answer those questions. We can get automated enrichment through third-party services. Then we can track and manage our consumers, and then export our indicators from the reports through a variety of means. The last two things, they're really simple, but they help. So you can know when your requirements need to be completed by. I think that's a big portion just because it keeps you on track, keeps you focused, and you know when your customers need their information. And lastly, we have a comment system. So on any report or indicator or requirement, you're able to comment on those just to get some information. So with that, we're gonna do a quick demo. So when you log into the platform, you get taken to the dashboard. So at the top, you'll see the different, you'll see the most recent the most recent intelligence requirements. You see that I only have 2 written right now. So the third one's just blank right here. But you'll get the name, you get an identifier, and then you'll say when this report requirement is due. So I have one that's pretty past due, and one's coming up in a few days. So I have some time. Below that, you'll see some consumers. So again, these are the people that we've identified in our requirements that are going to consume this intelligence work. Next to that, you'll be able to just dip into the actual requirement to view it. But before that, just some more metrics data. You get some like, just know how many requirements you have, know how many indicators you have currently, and the number of reports. And then below that is the types of indicators that you see in the platform, and then the different consumers that we support through the requirements and reports. So I try to follow some sort of logical flow of the way the platform works between the dashboard, your requirements, reports, indicators, consumers, and then settings, and some documentation at the end. So if we were to follow this flow, we first start with our requirements. So this is all the requirements that we have identified so far. On the left-hand side, you'll see like the ID, so some sort of friendly identifier. This could be, I don't make this a standard, so you can use whatever format you want for making identifiers. The title, this would be like a friendly title for whoever's going to read this. Your consumers are listed here along with the priority and the last updated dates. So from this dashboard, you can either edit or delete them. But first, we'll just start and view an actual requirement. For sake of time, I'm not going to write one down with y'all, but we can see one that I wrote for just like some demo purposes. So on the right-hand side, you'll see some metadata about the report or the requirement. So who wrote it, who the stakeholder would be, when it was created, and when it was last updated. In the summary, again, this is kind of like what this requirement is for. This one, again, it's pretty timely. It's about coronavirus and who's using this as phishing, coronavirus themed phishing pages. We want to kind of find out more information about that. Next is the gaps. So these are the specific questions that we should be asking our intelligence team to kind of answer. So what are the top domain hosting providers that are using, that are hosting coronavirus themed pages? What detections can be put in place to prevent our employees from being phished due to these? So they should be pretty specific. They should be kind of focused on an actual answer. And again, these kind of get handed off to the intelligence team to go in and find out. Next is our consumers again. Collection requirements. So this is the data that we need to gather to satisfy this requirement. So generate a list of the top domain hosting providers. Check out URL scan for some tag pages that might have coronavirus in them, things like that. Next is our deliverables. So this is the outcome from this requirement. This is what the consumer or stakeholder is expecting to see. So that could be SIM rules to detect, prevent, or respond to coronavirus themed pages, or a PDF, or whatever kind of report they want. So lastly, the time requirement. So when this should be due by. And again, I'm pretty past due on this one. So test user kind of asked what the status of this one is, and I'm saying it should be done today. So again, the comment section right here. And then on the right-hand side below the metadata, you can see that these reports are kind of linked back to this requirement. So when we write a report, we could tie this back to it so you know what this report ties to. From here, we're also able to edit this. If we need to change things, we could just go and add a new consumer, like HR wants to know about this too. And we can edit all the fields that we've already answered. When we hit submit, it takes us back to there, and so we have updated it. So let's look at some reports that we wrote that kind of satisfy this requirement. So again, the dashboard for this one is very similar to the requirements. It shows you the title, the ID, who wrote it, when it was created, and when it was last updated. So if we dig into the report, again, looks very similar to the requirements, but this is, again, their actual report, and you should immediately see a few things. So TLP is up here. We have our export options, which I can show you later. But here's the report that we wrote. Again, the comment section below it. We have tags for this report if you want to. But again, once you write this report, in the background, it kicks off a few jobs, and those jobs look for regular expressions for a few different key terms or URLs or whatever. But so this extracts IPs, URLs, email addresses, domains, hashes, vulnerabilities, and minor attack techniques. So clicking on one of those will populate on the right-hand side and give us some information about that. So for this IP, we get some information from IP info. We're able to change it. So if this is part of a different part of the kill chain, so we saw that they were actually doing recon from this IP, we could change it, as well as the diamond model. So we follow a few frameworks. So we can just say that this is the actual adversary, and it'll update the diamond model chart below it to be the adversary. Same with URLs. So depending upon what indicator type will differ between like what you see here. However, we have a sources thing over here. And so this is all the third-party enrichment sources. So if you click on sources, they'll show up depending on what kind of indicator you click on. So for IPs, we use Alien Vault, and that goes out and grabs information from Alien Vault, or Shodan, we can pull some information back, Risk IQ, Gray Noise, and anything from MISP too. So if you have a MISP instance that you want to connect to, you can configure that and search in here for it. For things like email addresses, we support email rep, we support MISP, have I been pwned, hunter.io. So you can see like my verdict for my email address is pretty risky, which I'm not sure why, but you can do domains, and that kind of supports Alien Vault, URL scan, Risk IQ. And again, clicking on those will give you the context that we've already enriched. A few things I like is for the CVEs. This uses Circle's CVE search. So this gives you a lot of context on vulnerabilities right here, which I like, and also minor attack techniques. This gives you some context on the actual technique here on the right-hand side that we pull from a JSON file that MITRE hosts for you. So again, the sources are dependent upon what indicator you click on. So for IPs, again, we have these. And when you create the report, that's when the jobs start. So when you create a report, those indicators automatically get enriched at that time. So this information is pulled from a database that's already been written to. However, if you want new details, you can click on this refresh indicator, and it'll say, hey, I'm enriching this, please wait. So that's going to start those jobs, those background jobs again, to start giving you the more up-to-date information. So with that, real quick, we can show you the export to MISP. This will just send the event to MISP. And then if we want to export this as a PDF, this will start exporting the PDF, and you can see that you get this pretty report that you can send to your consumers. So again, it's just the title, the ID for it, the actual contents. I'm not highlighting any indicators in here. I'm not sure if that would be too, how much value that would be if they're just highlighted, but certainly can add that. And then I pull out a PDF table of these, which I know isn't the best, but I think I'm gonna work on making this a CSV instead of in the PDF, so you don't need to try to copy and paste these, which is pretty horrible to do. So, and lastly, you'll just get like who published this and when. So let's move on to the indicators. So again, all these indicators, they'll get extracted, created into their new table, and then they'll be populated here. So this is all the indicators that we've seen in all our reports. If you click on one of those, you'll get to see on the left-hand side. I need to find a better way to do this visually, but it'll just show you all the details that it has from all the different sources. Ideally, it would be kind of a drop-down that you can view. And on the right-hand side, you can see what report this was related to. So if you click on this report, you can get tied back to the actual report that you saw this indicator in. That's pretty much it for an indicators. Moving on to consumers. So anytime you create a new consumer through your reports or your requirements, it'll create a new card here. And that's the name of them, when they were last updated, some stakeholder information, so my name and my email address, how many reports and how many requirements are tied to them, and when they were added in the platform. From here, you can either email them or just edit their information so that some of that information is added here. So you can add their additional team name or information for them, like it's a subset of the SOC or specific team or function. Then you could add their email address and the POC in here. So that manages all the consumers. Anytime a new one's added, like I said, it creates a new card in here. Moving on to the consumers. So we have a few settings that we can mess with here. We have an API, which I could show you a little bit about. We have integrations. So again, here's where all the integrations are configured. We have whois lookup, IP info, all these other ones that you can manage your keys and your APIs right here. Change your password, again, pretty self-explanatory, and webhooks. So again, if you put your Slack webhook in here, you'll see when a new notification is, you'll see when a new intelligence requirement is created, when the intelligence requirement is updated, or when a report is created. So I can pull that up in the background to show you. So again, when you get a new requirement or report, this is kind of what it will show you. You can say, hey, new intelligence requirements have been updated. Here's where you can go view it, who wrote it, the due date for it, and the summary of it. Lastly, we have user sections. This is where you can manage all your users, delete them, edit them, etc. Last thing that I want to show you is the search function. So if we just search for Corona, it won't return anything for some reason, but test, we get some of the reports and requirements that were written that have the word test in the summary fields. So ideally, I'll move this to any fields in the reports or requirements. You can search for keywords. So you can then see where that key term shows up in your reports or requirements. Lastly, the documentation. So I have how to use it, where to go for I use GitBooks for this, but it kind of talks about the requirements, the reports, all the different phases, or all the different parts of the tool for you. And then lastly, the API. So right now we have a few different functions. You can get all the indicators. You can get indicators from a specific ID. You can get indicators from a report itself, or you can get indicators by name. So you can just search for Brian at threadnote.io there. So trying to think if there's anything else. But that's pretty much the platform. Yeah. So some takeaways. Start using ThreatNote or don't. I would like you to, and I would like feedback for it, but my hope is that you start using it to manage your CTI processes, make your job easier. And a little just these two are just tips for you, but make sure you spend time on this overlooked parts of the Intel process, which is the requirements, I feel, and the stakeholder management. That's why I try to manage that in ThreatNote, just because those are really important, and I think it's really good for a threat intel team to kind of focus on those. Work with and know your consumers, know your requirements, understand your gaps, and deliver expected outcomes. And with ThreatNote, you can kind of do all those things, and I think you'll be on the right track as a new threat intel team. So follow me at Brian Warehime on Twitter, or check out threatnote.io for updates. Nothing's out there right now. I have a website for it, but I plan to open source actually today or this weekend, so stay tuned. I'd love if anybody could check it out and give me some feedback if you're a threat intel team and you use this, or if you want to start using it but you're missing some features, please let me know what kind of features you want in there added, and I'd love to just work on them. It's just me working on this too. I have some help from people in Upwork, which has been awesome because I'm not the greatest at JavaScript, so I've had to get some help from people on there. So if there's any features you want added, or if you want to work with me on this, it'll be open source, so feel free to contribute to it. So with that, that's my talk. Thanks everybody for listening. I guess we'll do some questions if there are any.
So it looks like there are a couple questions so far. One of them is we had someone try and create an account while you were doing your talk. Is it possible for people to sign up for the page and use the product at the moment?
No, so again, the one that was hosted right now, I tried to take it down just because I had to work out some bugs, but I have a Docker instance of this, and that's what's going to be available for users to check it out. I don't want this deployed. Like, I think I've been going between having a hosted version and a local version, and I think I'll kind of follow the Spiderfoot model of having a open source free version that you can deploy yourself with Docker, and also a hosted version that I'll just manage for you, and you can log in, create your accounts, and do all your work for you there. So the first version will be the open source version through Docker.
Very cool. And so is that up on like GitHub right now or?
Probably later today or this weekend.
Okay, awesome. Whenever that happens, if you wouldn't mind throwing me a link, I'll throw it in our chat, and then I want to play with it myself. So
Sure, great.